Every night when the town went quiet and the school hallways emptied of teenage noise, Mr. Dale began his shift. He wasn't much to look at, a man in his late 50s, shoulders slightly bent, uniform too big in the sleeves. The kind of man you might pass by without noticing. And yet he noticed everything. He noticed the gum under the desks, the names carved on lockers, the smell of cheap perfume that lingered long after the cheerleaders left. He noticed which lights flickered in the science wing and which doors never locked quite right. And when he walked those halls with his slow, steady gait, keys jingling softly at his belt, he carried something that most people had long forgotten, a quiet sense of duty. To most he was just the night guard. But to Dale this building was something sacred, a place where dreams began and sometimes ended. He had seen kids come in with fire in their eyes and leave with heads down, carrying the invisible scars of growing up. He had seen teachers who still cared and those who'd stopped trying. And through it all he swept, locked, and guarded as if protecting something more than walls, as if he was protecting the idea that every life in this place mattered. That night the laughter came again. It started faint, the high-pitched giggle of boys trying to stay quiet, then the burst of mockery that filled the corridor like glass breaking. He looked up from his mop, his breath visible in the cool hallway air. There they were, four of them, varsity jackets, phones out, the blue light flickering against their faces. "Yo, say cheese, old man." "Hey, don't drop your mop, hero." Laughter, sharp, careless, echoing. Dale froze for a second, not out of fear but out of something heavier. That familiar ache that comes when you realize you've become invisible and the only time they see you is to laugh. He could have shouted, could have told them off, but he didn't. He just smiled the way tired men smile, that small, broken curve that hides more than it shows. "Evening, boys," he said quietly. "Careful not to slip, floor's still wet." They laughed harder. One pretended to slip dramatically, another caught it on camera, a phone flash, more laughter. And then just like that they were gone. Their voices drifted down the hall, leaving only the hum of the lights and the faint smell of cleaning solution. Dale stood there for a moment, listening to his own heartbeat. He could hear the radiator ticking somewhere, the old pipes sighing in rhythm. In another life he might have been home by now, maybe asleep beside his wife, maybe tucking in his daughter. But that life had burned away years ago in a different kind of fire, and this was what was left, a man, a mop, and a hallway full of ghosts. He bent down, wrung the mop, and whispered to himself. "They're just kids, Dale, just kids." It wasn't anger he felt, not really. It was something lonelier than that. A quiet wish that someone, anyone, would remember that he once wore a different uniform. That once people didn't laugh when they saw him, they saluted. In his locker, hidden behind the cleaning supplies, was a faded photograph. A younger man in a firefighter's suit, soot on his face, smile unbroken. Next to him, a woman holding a little girl with the same soft eyes he had now. He touched the photo every night before his shift, not for luck but for memory, because memory was all he had left to guard. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the school windows with a low, trembling sound. Somewhere, a door creaked open. Dale turned his flashlight toward the noise, just an open vent. He exhaled, slow. The laughter was gone now, but its echo stayed, clinging to the walls, replaying in the corners of his mind. He thought about deleting the thought, erasing it the way he wiped graffiti off the bathroom stalls. But hurt doesn't wash away that easy. It sticks like dust on your skin after a long day, like smoke you can't scrub out of your lungs. At 2:47 a.m., he made his round to the West Wing. He paused by the fire exit, jiggled the handle, stuck again. He made a note on his clipboard. "Check west door lock faulty." No one ever read those notes. He wrote them anyway, because doing the right thing even when no one cares was how he kept the small fire inside him alive. And somewhere between the locker room and the gym, he stopped and looked out the window. Snow was falling, just a little, drifting under the parking lot lights. The world outside seemed soft, forgiving. Inside, everything felt harder, colder. He thought of his daughter, Emma, college senior now. He hadn't told her about the teasing, she had enough to worry about. She still thought her dad's job was important. And in a way, it was. He guarded futures, even if none of them would ever know his name. And that night, as he turned off the last hallway light, the school fell into silence. The kind of silence that only old buildings know, full of stories, empty of witnesses. Dale leaned on his mop handle, staring into the dark. The echo of laughter still lingered in the air, faint but cruel. He didn't know it yet, but that same hallway would burn before the week was over. And when it did, those boys who laughed would cry his name. The man they mocked would be the one who pulled them from the fire. By the time the first teachers arrived, Mr. Dale had already finished his rounds. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cold air, the kind that sticks to your sleeves and makes every breath visible. He moved like someone who'd learned to make himself small, quiet shoes, careful steps, eyes lowered not from shame but from habit. In the daylight, he didn't belong here. The kids belonged. The teachers, too. He was only the shadow that swept the crumbs of their world away before they woke. At 7:15, he clocked out, folded his jacket neatly over one arm and waited by the back door until the chatter of students began to spill in. He liked to watch that part, life returning to the building. Backpacks slung too low, sneakers squeaking, laughter that filled the walls like music from another time. No one noticed him, of course. They brushed by, eyes on their screens, earbuds in, already running late. To them he wasn't Mr. Dale the man. He was the guard, the ghost that cleaned up their messes. His badge said security, but night shifts meant covering whatever the building needed, locks, leaks, and sometimes mops. Once long ago, he was impossible to ignore. He used to wear a uniform that made people step aside, a dark jacket with his name stitched in gold, a helmet under his arm, boots that smelled of smoke and courage. When sirens wailed, people looked for him. Now they looked through him. At home, his apartment was small but neat. The morning light came in sideways through thin curtains, washing the walls in a faded gold. He made coffee the way his wife used to, 2 sugars, 1 stir counterclockwise, a small superstition he'd never given up. Her voice still lived in the quiet moments, somewhere between the clink of the spoon and the sigh of the kettle. Sometimes he talked to her picture on the fridge, not out loud but with that private whisper that only widowers know. "I'm okay, Linda, still working nights. Emma's doing good. She's gonna graduate soon." He'd smile faintly as if she could hear him. The table near the window was stacked with envelopes, bills mostly. One envelope had Emma's college crest on it. He ran his finger over the embossed lettering, tracing it like a blessing. That envelope held her tuition reminder. He never complained. Every overtime hour meant one more credit paid, one more step closer to the life he wanted her to have. When he left for work that evening, the sun was low, painting the sky in slow strokes of tangerine and violet. He walked the 6 blocks to the school, passing the bakery where the smell of fresh bread used to make him hungry, though now it mostly reminded him of mornings that no longer existed. Inside the school, the night swallowed sound differently. Every noise, the clang of a door, the faint tap of his keys, came back with an echo that felt alive. He sometimes thought of the building as a living thing, breathing in the warmth of day, exhaling the loneliness at night. He checked the stairwells, tested locks, replaced a burned-out bulb above the trophy case. His reflection flickered in the glass, gray hair, tired eyes, uniform creased at the elbows. For a moment he didn't recognize the man staring back. The janitor from the East Wing, a younger guy named Marco, passed by pushing a cart of supplies. "Even in, Mr. Dale," he said. "Even in, Marco." Dale nodded. Marco hesitated, then grinned. "Hey, saw a clip of you going around. Some kids thought it'd be funny." Dale looked up. "Yeah," he said softly. "Funny." Marco shifted awkwardly. "You know, people got short memories, man. Don't let it get to you." "It doesn't," Dale replied, then after a pause, "not for long." When Marco left, the hallway felt emptier than before. Dale finished tightening the new bulb. It flickered once and glowed steady. He stood there longer than necessary, bathed in that pale, humming light, as if trying to convince himself he still existed in it. He made his way to the security room, a small, windowless space that smelled of coffee grounds and old paper. Screens blinked quietly, showing corners of the school, classrooms, stairwells, the gym. On one monitor, he saw the reflection of a student passing by, holding a basketball under his arm. Another kid waved behind him. The images moved like scenes from someone else's world, a life that kept spinning while his had quietly gone still. He poured himself a cup of coffee. Bitter, overbrewed. He liked it that way. It kept him awake, kept him aware. Through the grainy glow of the cameras, he watched the same halls he'd walked for years. The kids had no idea that someone was always there, watching over them when the world went dark. He'd never tell them about the nights he stopped intruders, or the time he helped the math teacher who fainted during grading week. Those weren't stories anyone wanted to hear. Heroes, he'd learned, only exist when there's fire and panic. The rest of the time they fade quietly back into the wallpaper, and that was fine. He'd made peace with being a ghost. But sometimes, just sometimes, he missed being seen. He leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, letting the low buzz of the monitors lull him into that half-state between memory and sleep. He thought of Emma again, of the sound of her laugh as a child, how it used to fill the rooms of their old house like sunlight. He smiled at the thought. Then through the static of the security feed, a faint sound crackled through the speaker. Not laughter this time, something sharper, a short alarm tone one he didn't recognize cut through the quiet like a blade. He straightened up, listening. The monitors flickered once, twice. Then everything went still again. He rubbed his temple, exhaled slowly. Probably a glitch, he muttered, but deep down, a strange unease began to settle in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but that sound wasn't a glitch. It was the first whisper of a night that would burn itself into memory and change the meaning of his name forever. The next morning began like any other, sunlight spilling through the tall windows, the smell of pencil shavings and reheated cafeteria breakfast drifting through the halls. Yet something in the air had shifted. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps. Phones lit up in secret corners. And somewhere inside that storm of murmurs, Mr. Dale's name floated like dust no one wanted to touch. He didn't know it at first. When he arrived that evening, the school looked the same, tiled floors polished, bulletin boards bright with forgotten announcements, but the looks were different. The janitor at the east door nodded slower. One of the teachers avoided eye contact. A student giggled when he passed. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Noticing was part of his job. In the security office, the hum of the monitors filled the silence. On the third screen, he saw a group of students huddled together in the cafeteria, faces lit by their phones. Every few seconds, one of them burst out laughing, showing the screen to another. He leaned closer, squinting. It was him. His own face, creased, weary, caught mid-motion while wringing the mop, froze on the tiny screen. A caption scrolled across it. Guard of the Year. There were filters. One gave him cartoon eyes, another added sparkles around the mop bucket. Laughter filled the feed like static. His hands stiffened. He reached for the mouse, turned off the feed, and stared at the blank screen. For a long while, the only sound was the soft ticking of the clock above his head. He didn't feel anger, at least not the kind that burns. It was quieter, more like frost creeping under the door. He'd been laughed at before. Life has its ways of humbling you until you stop fighting for the last word. But this was different. This wasn't private cruelty. This was public, digital, endless. He made his rounds anyway, hall by hall, door by door. That was how he survived, through movement. The body doing what the heart couldn't yet bear to name. In the art wing, he passed a mural painted by last year's seniors, bright blues and yellows, all optimism and brushstrokes. Someone had drawn a pair of angel wings on the wall where students often posed for pictures. He stopped for a moment, studying them. The edges had faded, feather tips smudged by hundreds of hands. He wondered if anyone remembered who painted them. Then he heard it again, laughter. This time not distant. It echoed sharply off the linoleum floors, high and metallic. He turned the corner. 4 boys were gathered near the vending machine, their faces glowing blue under the flicker of its light. They didn't see him at first. He caught the faint buzz of a phone speaker, the sound of his own voice distorted, replaying. Someone had looped the moment from the video when he warned them, careful not to slip. The mockery was relentless, the repetition cruelly rhythmic. Careful not to slip. Careful not to slip. Careful. They laughed until they saw him. Then silence, heavy, awkward, almost guilty. One of them pocketed the phone. Another muttered, "Sorry, sir," though it sounded more like reflex than regret. Mr. Dale just nodded. "It's all right. Enjoy your evening." He turned away before they could answer. His chest felt tight, not from shame, but from the effort it took to keep his tone gentle. He didn't go back to the security office. Instead, he walked toward the auditorium. The large space was dark, save for the faint emergency light above the stage. The air smelled of velvet curtains and old wood, warm, worn, familiar. He stood there, breathing slowly, letting the quiet settle inside him. From the stage, the school looked smaller, rows of empty seats stretching into shadow. He'd stood on stages once years ago during fire department ceremonies. He could still remember the heat of the lights, the applause, the way his wife had looked at him like he'd hung the stars himself. Now the only sound was the slow creak of the rafters above. He sat on the edge of the stage, removed his cap, rubbed the back of his neck. His skin smelled faintly of soap and metal. His hands, rough and lined, bore tiny white scars that caught the dim light. He thought of calling Emma, just to hear her voice, but what would he say? "Hey, sweetheart, your old man's famous on the internet." He could almost hear her laugh, light, kind, unaware. He didn't want to stain it. When he left the auditorium, night had fully taken the halls. The fluorescent lights hummed above him in soft rows, each step echoing faintly like footsteps that didn't belong to him. He passed the trophy case again. Reflections of gold cups, shining names, smiling faces. Behind the glass, time stayed kind. He walked slower than usual that night. Every reflection on the polished floor seemed to ripple with its own memory. The smell of wax, the distant sound of a basketball bouncing in the gym, small things, alive with meaning he couldn't explain. When he reached the West Wing, he stopped by the same fire exit he checked every night. The handle caught halfway, still jammed. He made another note on his clipboard, his handwriting careful and neat. West door, repair requested again. He hesitated, then added quietly to himself, just in case. For the rest of the shift, he avoided the cameras. He focused on the tangible locks, switches, doors that needed oiling. The physical world still made sense. It obeyed rules. You could fix what was broken if you worked long enough. But when the lights flickered near the stairwell at 2 a.m., he caught his own reflection in the glass, muted, doubled, ghost-like. And for the first time, he wondered if that was what he had become. Not a man, not even a name, just an echo moving through the hallways of other people's lives. Outside, the wind carried the promise of snow again. Inside, the laughter had finally stopped. But its echo stayed, thin, persistent, hidden somewhere deep in the walls where no mop could ever reach. The rain had started sometime before dawn, steady and cold, washing the dust from the streets. It made the world quieter, muted, almost gentle. Inside his small apartment, Mr. Dale sat at the kitchen table, listening to it against the window. The sound reminded him of nights when his daughter, Emma, was little, how she used to press her palms against the glass, pretending to catch raindrops. He could almost hear her voice echoing down the years. "They're racing, Daddy. The drops are racing." He smiled faintly, a tired smile that belonged to memory more than joy. The apartment was dim except for a single lamp glowing beside the coffee pot. Steam rose in soft curls, carrying the smell of roasted beans and something older, dust maybe, or the worn pages of time. On the table, his phone buzzed once. A text from Emma. "Morning, Dad. Big day today. Presentation at the hospital internship program. Wish me luck." He typed slowly, careful not to make any typos. "Proud of you, sweetheart. You've got this." He read the words twice before hitting send, as if making sure they carried enough of what he felt but couldn't say out loud. The kitchen clock ticked towards 7:30. He would have to leave soon, walk through the wet streets back to the school. But for now, he stayed still, watching the thin line of rain slide down the glass. He didn't mind the rain. It gave the world a reason to look sad, and sometimes that was comforting to know it wasn't only him. Across from him sat an empty chair. He used to fill it with conversation. Now it just held his jacket, still damp from last night's shift. He reached for the newspaper, 3 days old, folded neatly. The front page headline was about rising property taxes, the kind of thing that made small talk in diners. He barely read it. Instead, he turned to the obituaries, a habit he developed since Linda passed. He didn't look for anyone in particular, only names, proof that the world kept taking quietly, one line at a time. By the time he got to work, the rain had eased into a drizzle. The air smelled clean, sharp with ozone. The parking lot glistened under the gray light, and puddles mirrored the flagpole and the school sign like small, rippling mirrors. Inside, the corridors felt emptier than usual. Most students had retreated to classrooms, escaping the weather. A janitor cart stood abandoned near the gym. Somewhere down the hall, the PA crackled to life with the principal's voice, distant and tinny. "Attention, staff and students. Reminder, safety inspection next week." The irony of that almost made him smile. He walked his route in silence. The building creaked in the damp. He could smell the faint sweetness of cafeteria syrup lingering from breakfast. It mixed with the metallic scent of wet floors. Small details, unnoticed by everyone else, were how he kept time. When he passed the science wing, he paused. Through the glass pane, he saw a teacher showing a class how to light a Bunsen burner. Tiny blue flames flickered on the metal stand. The sight pulled at something deep inside him, an old instinct, the way heat made his palms itch with memory. He looked away before it could hurt. Later in the break room, he made coffee and sat near the window, watching the drops race down again. Two teachers entered mid-conversation. They didn't see him at first. "Did you hear? That video's everywhere now," one whispered. "The night guard thing." "Yeah, my students were laughing about it all morning. It's cruel, honestly, but you know how kids are. Still, poor man." Their voices trailed off when they noticed him sitting there, hands wrapped around his mug. An awkward silence hung in the air. One gave a polite nod. The other murmured something about being late and hurried out. He didn't move. He just stared at the steam rising from his coffee, curling upward before vanishing into nothing. At noon, he stepped outside for a break. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement dark and glistening. He walked to the far end of the schoolyard where a row of oaks stood, their roots cracking through the sidewalk. The air smelled of wet earth and fallen leaves. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a letter Emma had written years ago, back when she was in middle school. The paper had softened with time, the ink faint at the edges. "When I grow up, I want to help people, like you do, Dad." He traced the words with his thumb. Back then, she'd believed he could fix anything. Every broken toy, every scraped knee, every bad day. Somewhere along the way, the world had stopped seeing him that way. But she hadn't, not yet. He looked up at the sky. The clouds were thinning, light breaking through in scattered patches. The kind of sky that promised maybe tomorrow would be better. A bell rang from inside. The muffled rush of students followed, shoes squeaking, lockers slamming, laughter rising and fading again. The living pulse of a place that didn't know his story, didn't need to. He walked back in, past the walls lined with awards and photos. In one picture, a young teacher stood smiling beside a group of students at a science fair. Dale caught sight of his own reflection faintly superimposed over them, ghost-like, transparent. He turned away. Back at his post, he checked the locks again. Each click of metal was steady, predictable, unlike people. He preferred things that stayed where they were supposed to. He worked through the afternoon, moving from hallway to hallway as the day dimmed. Outside, the last light caught on puddles, turning them into small shards of silver. Inside, the air cooled. His knees ached. His back tightened when he bent to pick up a dropped backpack left behind by someone too young to know the cost of fatigue. Before clocking out, he stopped by the storage room. He pulled out a small cardboard box labeled Emma. Inside were things he'd saved. Her old science fair ribbon, a Polaroid from her first school dance, a crayon drawing of their house with smoke curling from the chimney. He smiled faintly. Then he closed the box and locked it away again. The world outside had forgotten him, yes, but he was still someone's father. And even if no one saw him now, he knew, quietly, stubbornly, that every long night, every shift, every bruise of the spirit he carried was for her. By Thursday, the rain had stopped, but something colder had settled in the air, something unseen, humming through phones, whispered behind doors, sliding through the veins of the school like static. Dale could feel it before he knew what it was. People avoided his eyes. Conversation stopped when he entered a room. Even the janitors, usually quick with a nod or a joke, seemed unsure of what to say. At first, he thought it was just the weather again, maybe everyone was tired, the way gray skies make people small. But that afternoon, as he passed the staff lounge, he caught the faint, muffled sound of laughter, not the careless kind, the recognizing kind. He paused. The sound came from a teacher's phone, young, nervous laughter followed by a voice saying, "Wait, wait, watch the end." Then a chorus of giggles. He didn't have to hear it, he knew. His stomach tightened. His pulse thudded behind his ears. He stepped away before they could notice him standing there. The sound followed anyway, like an echo that knew his name. By evening, it was everywhere. The video, the one the boys had filmed weeks ago, was no longer a silly clip passed around in private. It had been uploaded, re-edited, remixed, captioned, laughed over, shared, and shared again. The Night Guard Chronicles, Episode 1, the caption read, a shaky clip of him mopping the floor, followed by the boys' mocking voices. Then the slow-motion replay of him looking up, caught in that unguarded second of surprise. Someone had added background music, circus tunes, loud and cruel. It was on TikTok, Instagram, Reddit threads, school group chats. The comment section was a firestorm of laughing emojis, jokes, memes. Bros cleaning up his dreams. Someone get this man a cape. Legend says he's still mopping. He didn't see it firsthand. He didn't need to. Marco told him quietly during the shift. Man, I tried reporting it, Marco said, eyes low. It's spreading fast. Sorry, Mr. Dale. Dale just nodded. Thanks for telling me. He didn't ask to see it. He couldn't bear to. The image of his face turned into a joke. It was already alive in his mind, sharper than any screen. That night the halls felt longer. The hum of the lights seemed louder. Every reflection in the glass looked slightly distorted, like the building itself had joined in on the laughter. He went about his work quietly, as always, checked doors, swept floors, noted small repairs. But something inside him felt off balance, like the rhythm that had carried him through all those lonely nights had suddenly slipped out of tune. When he passed the cafeteria, he saw it, two students sitting near the window, phones glowing. One of them noticed him and nudged the other, a small smirk, a whisper. Then they both turned their screens away, stifling laughter. He wanted to say something, anything, but words, he'd learned, don't survive well in humiliation. They crumble before they reach the air. He retreated to the security office. The room was dark except for the monitors, the soft flicker of blue-gray light moving over his face. He sat down, hands resting on his knees. His reflection looked pale, almost translucent in the glass. He reached for his phone. A notification blinked, a message from Emma. Hey, Dad, how's your week? Missed your call yesterday. He stared at the screen for a long time before typing. Busy, sweetheart. Everything's fine. Don't worry about me. His thumb hovered over the send button. He hesitated, then pressed it. The lie went out quietly into the night, like a paper boat into deep water. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. The air smelled faintly of dust and burnt coffee. Somewhere down the hall, a heater kicked on with a low, uneven hum. He thought about the video, how easily the world could take a single moment of someone's life and twist it until it no longer belonged to them. He wondered if any of those boys would even remember his name in a year, or if he'd simply exist as a meme, a passing joke buried under the next wave of cruelty. He tried to focus on the monitors again, but the images blurred. His eyes burned. He rubbed them with the heel of his palm, steadying his breath. He remembered something Linda used to say when their daughter came home crying over schoolyard teasing. People laugh when they don't understand, she'd tell Emma. Don't let their smallness shrink you. But back then, Linda was alive. The house had warmth. The words had a place to land. Now they just echoed. He turned off the main light and sat there in the half-dark, watching the rain bead against the small window. Each drop reflected the hallway light outside, tiny flickers of silver sliding down the glass. For a fleeting moment he imagined walking out, just leaving the job, the school, the laughter, moving somewhere no one knew him. But then he thought of Emma, of the tuition due in 2 weeks, of her dream of working in medicine, helping people. So he stayed, because that's what fathers do, they stay even when the world forgets what staying costs. Later, when his shift was nearly done, he walked the halls one last time. The floors gleamed under the dim lights. In the reflection, he saw his silhouette stretch and bend with every step until it didn't even look like him anymore. Outside, the rain began to fall harder. The sound filled the building, washing through vents and corridors. He paused near the fire exit, the same one that always jammed. He tried the handle again. Stuck. He jotted it down once more in his logbook. The ink smeared slightly under his damp fingers. Then he looked up. Through the narrow window, lightning flashed across the sky. For a second the world went white, and in that white, silent moment, he imagined all the laughter burning away, leaving only quiet, and the faint outline of a man who refused to disappear. The summons came folded neatly in his locker, white paper, typed in careful formality. Mr. Dale, please report to the principal's office at 3:30 p.m. Administration. No explanation, no subject line, just his name printed plain like a label. He stared at it for a long moment before folding it back into his pocket. The day outside was bright, the kind of sharp, unkind brightness that made everything look too clear. Through the glass doors, students crossed the courtyard, laughing in clusters, the wind tugging at their jackets, sound of life too far away to touch. He'd known this moment would come, though not like this. He had expected perhaps a quiet word, a short reminder to ignore the jokes, to let the kids be kids. But a meeting, That meant something had escalated. At 3:25, he washed his hands in the janitor's sink, scrubbed off the faint smell of bleach, and combed his hair with his fingers. The mirror above the sink was cracked in one corner, splitting his reflection in two. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that seeps into the bones, into the way a man carries his shoulders. The walk to the office felt longer than usual. The halls were half empty, lockers slamming shut as students hurried home. The floor, freshly mopped, still smelled faintly of lemon polish. He passed the trophy case again. The glass reflected a warped version of himself, a man who belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. When he reached the office, the secretary, Mrs. Owens, looked up with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's expecting you, Mr. Dale." Her voice was polite, practiced, the tone people used when they didn't want to take sides. Principal Harris sat behind his desk, glasses low on his nose, a pile of printed papers in front of him. The blinds were half drawn, letting in slats of late afternoon light that painted thin shadows across the room. The smell of coffee mingled with the faint musk of old carpet and paperwork. "Please have a seat," Harris said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Dale sat back straight, hands folded loosely in his lap. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretched taut and heavy. "You've seen the video?" the principal finally asked. Dale nodded once. "Yes, sir." Harris sighed, removing his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It's unfortunate, truly. I want you to know we take this kind of situation seriously." Dale waited. The words hung in the air, all softness and no weight. "It's brought some attention to the school," Harris continued. "Not the kind we want. The board's been getting calls. Parents, media, you understand." Dale looked down at his hands. The skin was rough, a small cut healing near his thumb. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly. "No, of course not. No one's saying you did. But the optics, Mr. Dale," Harris hesitated, searching for the right word. "The optics aren't ideal. It's become a distraction. Students are sharing it during class. Teachers are struggling to maintain focus." He felt a slow warmth rise in his chest, not anger exactly, but something close. "A distraction," he repeated, "because I was doing my job." Harris shifted uncomfortably. "You have to see it from our side. The internet doesn't forget, and our priority is to protect the school's image." There it was, that word again. Image, not people, not dignity. Image. Dale leaned forward slightly. "Sir, I've worked here 12 years. Nights, weekends. I've fixed things no one noticed, stopped break-ins, made sure kids got home safe, and now I'm a problem." Harris avoided his eyes. He shuffled the papers, aligning their edges like a man trying to organize guilt. "We're not punishing you," he said finally. "But maybe it's best if you take a few days off. Let things settle." Silence filled the space between them. The sound of the clock grew louder. Dale nodded slowly. The motion felt heavy, mechanical. "A few days," he repeated. "With pay, of course," Harris added quickly. "We'll revisit next week." He stood, extending his hand. Dale rose but didn't take it right away. His gaze drifted to the window outside. The sky was turning amber, clouds drifting like tired thoughts. Somewhere beyond those walls, life kept moving, unaware of the quiet humiliation taking shape inside this small office. Finally, he shook the man's hand. The grip was brief, perfunctory, neither warm nor cold. Back in the hallway, the air felt different, thicker, somehow heavier. Students had gone home. Only the faint sound of a vacuum hummed in the distance. The smell of chalk dust lingered in the stillness. He walked slowly, not sure where he was heading. His steps echoed down the long corridor, lonely and precise. At the end of the hall, he stopped by the maintenance closet, unlocked it, and set his key ring on the hook. The sound of metal on metal was sharper than he expected. He stood there for a while, staring at the keys, at the dull shine they caught from the overhead light. Each one opened a door, kept something safe. Now they just hung there, silent witnesses to his invisibility. He thought of Emma again, of her text messages, her plans, her bright voice on the phone, how she believed in a father who still mattered. His throat tightened. He swallowed hard, steadying himself. He picked up his jacket, folded it carefully over his arm, and turned toward the exit. The parking lot was nearly empty. The air carried the faint scent of rain on concrete. He stopped by his car, gripping the roof lightly, eyes closed. The wind moved gently through his hair. He didn't know what he felt, anger, shame, or simply fatigue. They'd all begun to sound the same. In the rearview mirror, the school building loomed against the fading light, tall, indifferent, windows glowing with the last traces of day. He started the engine. The sound broke the silence, low and steady. Before driving off, he looked one last time at the school, at the place he'd spent years protecting. The place that now wanted him unseen. The night he came back to work, the air had that early spring sharpness, cool enough to sting the lungs, soft enough to feel forgiving. Mr. Dale parked his car in the far corner of the lot under the one lamp that flickered between gold and white. He sat for a moment, the engine idling, fingers resting on the steering wheel. The building loomed ahead, its windows dark, its shape familiar yet somehow foreign, as if it were quietly judging his return. He turned off the ignition. The ticking of the cooling engine filled the silence. Somewhere beyond the football field, a train horn called out, low and distant, fading into the night. He stepped out, adjusting his jacket against the chill. The pavement was damp from an earlier drizzle, and his shoes made a faint squeak with every step. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with something faintly metallic, maybe the lingering scent of rain against the old flagpole. Inside, school greeted him with the soft hum of electricity. Every building had its own sound, and this one breathed in wires and vents and hidden pipes. He knew each of them by heart. It was strange, returning after the meeting, after those quiet days off that weren't really rest. The air felt different now, like a room you've left for too long, familiar yet wary of you. He signed the logbook at the front desk. The pen felt heavy, his handwriting slower than usual. Return to duty, 10:02 p.m. He clicked the pen shut, the sound echoing more sharply than it should have. He began his rounds. The rhythm came back automatically, checked the main doors, the science labs, the auditorium, the stairwells. Routine was safety. Routine meant you didn't have to think. In the cafeteria, the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the empty space. Rows of tables gleamed under pale fluorescent light. He ran a rag across one, though it was already spotless. The smell of cleaner mixed with the ghost of syrup from earlier that day. He paused by the vending machine, the same one where those boys had stood laughing months ago. Someone had taped a new poster beside it. Respect weak. Kindness starts here. The irony made something in him ache. He stared at the smiling cartoon hands on the poster until his vision blurred slightly. Then he moved on. Down the next corridor, the janitor's cart squeaked softly, the wheels uneven from years of use. He pushed it slower tonight, the rhythm steady and deliberate. His shoulder ached. The doctor had once called it old injury, though it never fully healed. He rubbed it absently, feeling the pull of muscle under the fabric. He passed the art room. Through the small glass pane in the door, moonlight poured across the floor in a soft silver stripe. Paintbrushes sat in jars like soldiers at rest, the faint smell of acrylic and clay still hanging in the air. He paused a moment, drawn by the stillness. Art had always felt like a language he never learned, a way people said things they couldn't admit out loud. He envied that. He kept walking. The gym was next, vast, hollow, echoing. His footsteps bounced off the walls. The scoreboard still glowed faintly, forgotten after the last game. The smell of rubber and sweat lingered in the air, grounded and human. He stood there for a while, listening to the silence between echoes. Then came the library, his favorite. Even empty, it felt alive. The faint smell of paper and glue, the warm weight of old stories sleeping on shelves. He turned on the small lamp at the front desk. The light spread like honey, soft and golden. On impulse, he reached for a random book from the cart, something about human behavior. He flipped it open halfway through, scanning lines that blurred together. But one sentence caught his eye. Dignity is not what others give you. It's what you keep when they try to take it away. He closed the book gently, the sound of pages folding into quiet. Midnight came softly, carried by the subtle shift in air pressure, the building exhaling. He moved through the halls slower now, not out of fatigue but out of reverence. There was a holiness to empty places, he thought, to the way silence wrapped around you without judgment. In the west wing, he stopped by the fire exit. He tried the handle again, still stiff. He pressed harder this time. The metal groaned, half turning. A note of progress. Maybe, he smiled faintly, marking it in his log. West door partial movement. Needs maintenance ASAP. His handwriting wavered, the ink pooling slightly in one corner. As he turned to leave, the wind outside picked up, rattling the glass. The lights above him flickered once, twice, then steadied. For a heartbeat, everything went dim, the corridor, his breath, even the hum of the building. Then it all came back at once. He stood still, hand resting lightly on the cart handle. A pulse of something moved through him, not fear but awareness, like the building had just whispered his name. He shook it off and continued toward the main hall. His reflection followed him in the glass, taller somehow, stretched by light and shadow. His mind wandered to Emma again. She would be sleeping now, her phone on silent, textbooks scattered across her desk. He liked imagining that, her surrounded by the life he was working to give her. By 1 o'clock, the building had gone still. He sat in the security office for a moment, sipping lukewarm coffee, letting the quiet settle. The monitors blinked in rhythmic patterns, each room a grainy window into stillness. The world looked harmless in grayscale. He leaned back, closed his eyes just for a minute. His mind wandered through the small sounds, the soft tap of water in a pipe, the creak of wood expanding with temperature, the whir of the vent. It was music of its own kind, lonely but honest. Outside, the wind shifted again, bringing the faint smell of something burning, wood smoke, maybe from a distant house. He barely noticed it then. He finished his round at 2, checked every door twice, wrote every note clearly. Before leaving, he stood by the main entrance, looking out at the parking lot. The flickering lamp still pulsed between gold and white. The world felt suspended, waiting for something unnamed. He took a slow breath, the air tasting faintly metallic, like a storm that hadn't yet arrived. He didn't know why, but he lingered longer than usual before locking up. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was the kind of instinct you don't recognize until later, when it's too late to call it anything but fate. The night began the same way every long night does, ordinary, unremarkable, quiet enough to make you forget that danger ever existed in the world. Mr. Dale walked his final round before midnight, his flashlight cutting a soft cone through the dim corridors. The air carried that hollow chill of spring nights, clean, thin, with a trace of something metallic. He noted the creaks of the building automatically, the groan of an old locker door, the sigh of air from the vents. He knew each sound so well that the slightest change, a click where there should be a hum, a vibration where there should be stillness, would pull him instantly alert. That instinct, old as muscle memory, had never left him. He paused by the west stairwell. The bulb above him flickered again, just once, but enough to wash the walls in brief shadow. He tapped it with the end of his flashlight, a small, harmless habit. The light steadied. He smiled faintly. It was routine. It was all routine. At the far end of the hall, a faint draft drifted from beneath the science lab door. He noticed it immediately. Strange, he thought, it hadn't been like that earlier. He checked the knob. Locked. Still, something about the air unsettled him. A subtle shift in temperature. A faint smell, chemical, almost sweet, like burnt sugar. Wrote a quick note on his clipboard. Science lab, air vent leak, slight odor. Then he moved on. By 12:40, he was back in the security office. The monitors blinked in monochrome rhythm, the world divided into quiet squares of gray light. He poured himself coffee, stale and bitter but familiar, and leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Outside, wind rattled the flagpole chain. The sound came in bursts, metallic and hollow. Inside, everything was still. Then something changed. He didn't hear the alarm, he felt it first. A faint tremor underfoot, like the ground giving a shallow breath. He straightened, eyes on the monitors. In one frame, the camera near the science lab showed a flicker, not of movement but of light. A low, pulsating glow bleeding from beneath the door. He frowned, leaning closer. The timestamp blinked steady. The glow brightened once, then vanished. He waited for the alarm to go off. It didn't. Grabbed his flashlight and radio. "This is Dale, West Wing Lab Corridor, possible malfunction, checking it out." Static answered, no voice. The line hissed and died. He started down the hall, his boots pressing soft against the waxed floor. The smell hit him halfway there, no longer faint, now acrid, heavy with melting plastic and something darker beneath it. His chest tightened. The kind of smell that made old instincts wake fast and hard. He broke into a jog. At the end of the hall, thin smoke drifted from the crack beneath the lab door, gray at first, then black, curling like a question mark in the air. He didn't hesitate. He tried the handle. Locked. Heat pulsed faintly through the metal. He stepped back, shoulders tensing. Years ago, this had been second nature. Read the smoke, gauge the heat, act before the fire found its breath. He scanned the wall, fire alarm panel nearby, red switch ready. He slammed it down. Nothing. No siren, no flashing light, just silence. He hit it again, still nothing. A thin bead of sweat slid down his temple, not from heat, but from knowing exactly what that meant. The system was dead. Maybe an electrical fault, maybe negligence. It didn't matter. The fire didn't care. He pulled the master keyring from his belt, flipped through it fast. The keys clinked like chimes in trembling hands. Wrong one. Another. Another there. The key turned with resistance, like metal fighting time. He shoved the door open. Smoke spilled out, thick and alive, rolling low across the floor. It crawled like fog with purpose. His eyes burned. He dropped low by instinct. The source was near the back table. One of the small burners had tipped. Its rubber hose melted into a puddle of fire. Papers and fabric fed the flames, orange tongues licking upward, searching for oxygen. He scanned quickly. No one inside. But the vent above was pulling smoke toward the hallway. It would spread fast. He moved fast now, pulled the fire blanket from the wall, threw it across the table, pressing down hard with both arms. The heat bit through the fabric, searing his sleeves. His breath came short and shallow. The fire coughed once, then shrank to glowing coals beneath the blanket. He stood, panting, wiping sweat from his forehead. The silence afterward was deafening. His ears rang from the absence of alarm. He turned toward the alarm panel by the door. A small red light blinked once, then died. Fault light. System offline. He felt a sharp twist of disbelief. The school's entire fire alert system silent. If that flame had caught something bigger, if the gas line had ruptured, no one would have known until it was too late. He grabbed the radio again, trying the channel. Maintenance to control, fire alarm system offline. Repeat, system is down. Fire contained in science wing but needs inspection immediately. Nothing, just static. He tried again. Still static. He looked around the corridor. The walls gleamed faintly, gray smoke drifting across the ceiling in thin veins. He coughed, waving it aside. He made his way back toward the office, writing fast in his report log. Fire in science lab, alarm failure, contained manually, system needs urgent check. His handwriting was uneven. He tore the page free and pinned it to the maintenance board. Then he sat for a long while, staring at his reflection in the monitor glass. The faint gray haze from the hallway still clung to his shirt, and his hands smelled of burnt rubber. He thought of how close it had been, how easily the night could have turned, how thin the line was between quiet and catastrophe. Outside, wind pressed against the windows, rattling them softly. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, whispering to no one in particular. Not tonight. He didn't know it yet, but the alarm that didn't sound would be the first sign, that small, silent failure that would decide everything. The night after the alarm failed, Mr. Dale couldn't shake the feeling that something in the building had changed. He'd been around long enough to know when walls were keeping secrets. The air itself carried it, an unease too subtle to name. He'd filed his report, written the words clearly, sent it through the proper chain. But he knew how those things worked. Forms went missing. Systems stayed broken. Earlier that evening, he'd checked the fire panel in security. A tiny service light blinked once and died. Work order filed. No technician yet. And the fire he'd put out in the lab had left behind more than smoke. It had left a silence that didn't feel like safety. He came in early that evening, just after sundown. The corridors stretched ahead in their quiet stillness, pale under the fluorescent light. He ran a hand along the cold metal of the lockers, feeling the faint tremor in his fingertips. That old scar on his wrist, the one he'd earned years ago in a different fire, had started to itch again. It always did when the air grew too dry or when memory tried to crawl back through time. He walked his route slower than usual. Every creak of the floors made him turn. Every flicker of light felt like a whisper. He told himself it was nerves, that exhaustion played tricks on a man who'd carried too many nights on his shoulders. But deep down, something older stirred, a sense honed by years of listening to the world just before it broke. Midnight, he reached the west corridor. The faint smell from the science wing lingered even now, woven into the paint, into the vents. It had that chemical tang, half ash, half sweetness. He paused there, breathing it in, trying to tell if it was memory or warning. Then faintly from somewhere above, the smallest pop, a sound no one else would have noticed. He froze. It came again, clearer this time, the distinct cough of a fuse or a wire catching flame. His heart rate quickened. He turned toward the stairwell and saw it. just the faintest thread of smoke curling downward from the ceiling vent, like the ghost of what he'd already fought once before. He didn't think. He moved. He hit the stairwell door hard, climbing 2 steps at a time. The smell thickened, burning insulation, paper, that unmistakable dry crackle of fire eating its way into something hollow. The second-floor air shimmered faintly in the dim light, rippling with heat. He reached the east classroom wing and stopped. Flames, not small, not contained. This was a living thing now, feeding greedily on the curtains near the teacher's desk, crawling across bulletin boards, devouring the air. The fire alarm again silent. The sprinklers dry, he swore under his breath. The system was dead, still unfixed. He pulled the radio from his belt, pressed the button. "Control, this is Dale. Fire on second floor, east wing. Alarm failure, repeat. Alarm failure. Building must be evacuated immediately." Static, then silence. He looked down the hall, classroom doors locked, light flickering inside 1 or 2. Students had been rehearsing for the spring concert earlier that day. Maybe someone left something plugged in, maybe a wire shorted. He didn't have time to wonder. A few had stayed late to finish props. The after-hours auto lock could have sealed them in. He ran. The smoke clawed down from the ceiling, thick and fast. His throat burned. He dropped low, crawling to the nearest door, banging his fist against it. Anybody in there? No answer, just the low, hungry sound of wood catching fire. He moved to the next room, then the next, each door unlocked, each room empty until he reached the 4th one. Voices, faint, terrified. "Hello? Is somebody out there?" He yanked the handle, locked. He looked through the glass, 3 students huddled near the window, light from their phones cutting through the smoke. "Get back," he shouted. He braced his shoulder and hit the door once, twice. The metal frame rattled but held. The smoke thickened around him, crawling into his lungs. He coughed hard, eyes stinging. He spotted a fire extinguisher on the wall, ripped it free and slammed it against the glass. It shattered in a burst of sparks and shards. "Come on." They hesitated, stunned. He climbed halfway through the frame, glass cutting into his sleeve. Reached out, grabbed the first hand he could find, pulled, then another, then the last. One of the kids, a boy no older than 16, stared up at him through the haze. "We tried the alarm. It didn't—" "I know," Dale said, voice hoarse. "Stay low, follow my light." He led them down the hall, keeping close to the wall where the air was clearer. The building groaned above them, a low animal sound of wood and heat. Halfway to the stairwell, a ceiling tile fell, shattering beside them. Sparks flew across the floor. The boy screamed. Dale grabbed him by the collar, pushing him forward. His lungs screamed for air, his head pounded from the lack of oxygen. When they reached the stairwell door, it was hot to the touch. He kicked it open anyway. The metal scorched his boot sole, but they made it through. Cooler air met them below. "Keep moving," he rasped. The youngest girl stumbled, coughing. He lifted her onto his shoulder without breaking stride, every muscle in his back screaming. His heartbeat was thunder in his ears. He could feel the heat chasing them, alive, furious. At the bottom landing, they burst through the exit. The night air hit like a wave, cold, wet, full of oxygen. The kids collapsed on the pavement, gasping, eyes wide. He looked back. Smoke poured from the upper windows, orange light flickering behind the glass. No alarm, no siren, nothing. He turned toward the nearest classroom wing. Others could still be inside, teachers, late students. He didn't even think to stop. One of the boys caught his sleeve. "Sir, don't go back." Dale pulled free gently, his voice low but steady. "I have to, there's more up there." He ran through the doorway again, the smoke closing over him like water. The air burned in his throat. His flashlight beam shook in his hand, cutting through a wall of gray. He was breathing fire now, every inhale sharp and bright inside his chest. But he kept moving. He knew the layout by heart, where every exit was, every dead corner. And in that moment, it didn't feel like duty. It didn't feel like redemption. It felt like home, that old familiar rush, the one he hadn't felt since the last time he'd worn a real uniform. The fire, in all its fury, called to him like an old friend, reminding him who he'd been before the world turned cruel. His lungs screamed. His vision blurred. But still he climbed deeper into the glow, where the sound of distant voices called out for help, and where fate waited, heat shimmering in its breath. The night outside was silent, unaware. And inside that silence, the fire grew teeth. Heat had its own sound, a language that only men like Mr. Dale could understand. It crackled and moaned, flexing against the steel bones of the school like something alive. It didn't scream. It whispered. And those whispers told him everything: where to move, where not to breathe, which direction death was traveling next. He climbed the east stairwell again, breath shallow, one arm shielding his face. The air shimmered around him, dense as syrup, heavy with soot. His flashlight cut through the gray and trembling slices of light. He'd gotten 3 kids out, but the fire wasn't done. Every instinct told him others were still inside. The music room, maybe, the late-night theater rehearsal. He knew how easily doors locked themselves when heat warped the frames. At the top of the stairs, the smoke thickened, black as velvet. He dropped low, crawling. The world narrowed to 2 feet ahead, one heartbeat at a time. He could taste the air, bitter metal, ash and something else, fear, maybe his own. Then a sound through the smoke, a voice, small, ragged, muffled. "Help, someone, please." He froze, listening. The voice came again, clearer this time, through the hallway to his left. He turned, pushing forward. His knees scraped tile slick with soot. The beam of his light found the source, a classroom door glowing faintly around the edges. The heat made the handle shimmer red. Behind the small glass window, movement, a figure, then another. Shadows pressed against the pane, students, at least 2. He crawled to the door, shouting, his voice breaking in the noise. Step back, away from the door. Inside, one of them he could see now, a boy with a varsity jacket pounded on the glass. "It won't open," he cried. "It's jammed." Of course it was. The swollen frame, he'd reported this problem a dozen times. Warped hinges, frame expansion. They'd never fixed it. The irony hit like a slap. The same kind of door that had mocked him all those weeks, the one he'd written up again and again, had chosen tonight to betray everyone. He reached for the handle. Pain shot through his palm. It was burning hot, the metal searing instantly through his glove. He jerked back, gritting his teeth, then wrapped his jacket sleeve around it and pulled. Nothing. The frame had swollen shut. He dropped to one knee, coughing, eyes watering. His lungs burned with every breath. Smoke moved in waves now, each one thicker, blacker, rolling through like ocean surf. He tried again. Once, twice. Nothing. Inside, the students' voices grew frantic. "Please, please help us." He looked through the window and recognition hit like a blow. The boy in front, the one with the jacket, the face pale and streaked with tears, was one of the same kids who'd filmed him, who'd laughed as he mopped floors. The memory flashed sharp. The laughter, the phones, the humiliation. And now the same boy looked at him through smoke and glass, eyes wide, mouth trembling, the word "please" breaking in his throat. Dale didn't hesitate. He threw his shoulder against the door once, twice, each strike a burst of white pain down his arm. The frame held, groaning. Heat pressed against his back, thick and relentless. He coughed hard, vision blurring. The third hit sent a jolt up his spine, still locked. He took a step back, glanced around. The extinguisher empty, the hall too narrow. His flashlight beam caught the glint of a metal chair outside another classroom. He staggered to it, grabbed it by the legs, the metal scorching his fingers. "Back up," he shouted again. He swung. Once, the glass spidered. Smoke poured through the cracks. Twice, and the window burst, raining shards across the floor. The heat inside roared outward, licking the hall. He ducked, covering his face, then reached through the frame, fumbling for the interior latch. His sleeve caught fire for half a second. He smothered it fast. His hand found the latch and twisted. The door jolted but didn't give. "Push from your side." He yelled. They did. One, then both together. The frame screamed, the metal warping, a final shove, and it gave. They spilled out, coughing, eyes red. He grabbed them, pulling them close to the floor. "Down, crawl, keep low." The heat pressed behind them like a living thing, chasing oxygen. They crawled inch by inch, Dale guiding with one arm, pushing them forward with the other. His lungs burned raw. Each inhale felt like swallowing needles. The hallway flickered orange, the fire crawling along the ceiling tiles now, crackling louder, closer. Halfway to the stairs, one of the boys stumbled, disoriented. Dale caught him under the arm, dragging him forward. The smoke stung his eyes until tears cut clean lines down the ash on his face. When they reached the stairwell, he glanced back. The doorway they'd come from was gone, just a wall of flame now, twisting and alive. He shoved the students through first, shouting, "Go, don't stop, follow the light." They disappeared down the stairs, coughing, crying. He stayed one step behind, the railing hot under his hand. On the last landing, his knee gave slightly, the old injury screaming from the weight. He gritted his teeth, pushed through. The air grew clearer the lower they went, tinged with cool oxygen that bit at his throat. When they burst out through the first-floor door, the world felt unreal, cool rain, blue lights flashing in the distance, sirens finally wailing somewhere far away. He dragged the last boy out into the open air. The kid collapsed onto the wet grass, shaking, gasping, half in shock. Dale leaned against the wall, coughing hard, his body trembling from exhaustion and heat. His palms were raw, his arms were streaked with soot and burns. The boy looked up at him through the haze. His voice was small, broken. "You came back." Dale nodded once, breath uneven. "Of course I did." The boy's face crumpled. He opened his mouth to speak, to apologize maybe, but Dale lifted a hand weakly. "Not now," he said softly. "Just breathe." Above them, a window shattered, sending sparks into the rain. The roofline glowed orange against the dark sky. The sound was endless, sirens, thunder, the building's quiet surrender. Dale sank to his knees, head bowed. His vision swam, the edges dimming. His heartbeat felt far away now, steady but slow. He could still hear them breathing beside him, the boys he'd saved, the ones who once made him invisible. The fire hissed under the rain, fighting to stay alive. And for the first time that night, Dale let go of the thought of what might still be burning inside. The night had turned red. The flames pulsed against the clouds, painting the world in restless light. Smoke rose in thick pillars, bending with the wind before disappearing into the dark. The school looked unrecognizable now, its shape warped, its silence replaced by the hungry roar of collapse. "Mister." Dale knelt in the grass, breath shallow, rain soaking through his clothes. His body trembled from exhaustion. Every nerve still hummed with the echo of the fire's voice, the deep, rhythmic groan of wood giving way. Around him, the air smelled of char, melted plastic, wet concrete. It clung to the back of his throat, acrid and real. Someone shouted nearby. 2 firefighters rushed past him, their reflective jackets gleaming in the glow. One of them paused. "Sir, you need medical attention, let's get you clear." He tried to stand, but his knees faltered. "There are others," he rasped. "Upstairs, north wing." "We've got a team in there now," the firefighter said, gripping his shoulder. "You did good, you got people out." Dale nodded, though his mind was still somewhere inside the smoke. The hallway, the door, the heat, everything felt both far away and burning beneath his skin. He looked down at his hands. The skin was blistered across the palms, the edges blackened and slick from melted fabric. He barely felt it anymore, just a deep, pulsing ache that matched the thunder overhead. A gust of wind pushed the smoke sideways, revealing the main courtyard. Students and teachers huddled there, faces pale, clothes damp, voices hushed. Someone wrapped a silver blanket around the boy from the locked room. Another helped the girl into an ambulance. Dale watched as the boy looked back once, eyes wide, searching. When their gazes met, the boy raised a shaking hand, half gratitude, half disbelief. Dale gave a small nod in return, then lowered his head. He should have felt relief, but relief was slow to come when the world around you was still burning. He pushed himself up, unsteady. Each step toward the building felt heavier, his boots sinking into the soaked earth. Firefighters shouted for him to stay back, but his eyes stayed fixed on the upper windows, the glow still alive behind the glass. He knew that layout by heart. The library, the old West Wing office, the spot where he'd left his logbook on the desk, the one with Emma's letters tucked between its pages. Something inside him clenched. He started forward again. A hand caught his arm. Marco, his fellow janitor, soot smeared across his face. "Dale, don't, you can't go back in there. There's no one left," Dale said quietly. "Just something I need to get." "Forget it, man, it's gone." But he couldn't. He couldn't let that piece of her burn, that one small proof that his nights had meant something. He pulled free. The heat hit him the moment he stepped through the shattered door. It wasn't just physical, it was alive, vibrating through his bones. The entryway ceiling had collapsed in places, embers glowing where the rain hadn't yet reached. Each breath was a battle. He pulled a wet cloth from the floor, tied it around his face, and kept moving. Down the main hall, the walls glowed faintly, paint blistering in uneven waves. The smell of scorched books hit him near the library, thick and nostalgic in a strange way. He pushed through the door, the frame sagged, half melted. Inside, shelves leaned drunkenly, paper floating in the air like black snow. The desk still stood by the far wall, its edges charred. He staggered toward it. His vision swam from the heat. He reached for the drawer, yanked it open. The logbook was there, edges darkened but intact. He grabbed it, clutching it to his chest, the paper warm, almost burning through his jacket. A low creak cut through the roar behind him. The floor shifted, boards groaning. He turned, too late. The ceiling beam snapped with a sound like thunder. He dove sideways as it crashed down, sparks scattering like fireflies. Pain shot through his left leg, a heavy, crushing weight pinning him at the calf. He gasped, biting back a shout. The smell of burning wood filled his nostrils. He tried to move, but the beam held fast. For a moment he lay still, feeling the tremor of the building through the floor. His ears rang. He thought of Emma, her laugh, her tiny hands on his shoulders when she was small. How she used to tell him she wasn't afraid of storms because her dad was braver than lightning. He laughed once, dry, breathless. Maybe she'd been wrong. Or maybe not. Maybe bravery wasn't about not being afraid. Maybe it was about staying put even when you had every reason to run. He braced both arms against the beam, pushed. His muscles screamed. The wood didn't move. He tried again, this time twisting, dragging one leg free inch by inch. Pain shot white-hot through his side, but he kept going. One more push. The beam shifted, just enough. He rolled clear, pulling himself toward the door. His vision dimmed at the edges, the air thick with ash. He made it halfway before his strength gave out. Then a sudden rush of cool air. Hands grabbed him, strong and urgent. Voices shouted his name. "We've got him, we've got him." He felt himself lifted, weightless, the world spinning in a whirl of red and black and white light. The rain hit his face again, cold and pure. When he opened his eyes, the sky above him was gray with dawn. The fire was dying. The roof had collapsed, steam rising where water met heat. He could hear someone crying softly nearby, maybe a student, maybe a teacher. And through it all, the steady voice of a paramedic. "You're safe, sir. Just stay with me. You did good." He turned his head weakly. Across the courtyard, Emma's picture from the letterhead, the one he'd tucked into his book, had somehow fluttered loose, plastered now against the wet pavement. Her smile looked up at him through droplets of rain. His chest rose in a slow, shaky breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. Not because people were watching, not because cameras might record it, but because, for one night, he had become exactly what he was meant to be, a protector. He closed his eyes. The rain fell harder, washing over his face, hissing against the cooling ruins. And above it all, the fire finally went quiet. The first thing Mr. Dale felt was the air, cool, sterile, filtered through machines. Then came the smell, antiseptic, faintly metallic, touched with coffee from a nurse's cup somewhere close by. His body was heavy, weighted by exhaustion and morphine. He tried to move his fingers and felt the pull of bandages. A voice broke through the haze. "Good morning, Mr. Dale. Don't move too much. You're safe." The nurse's tone was warm, the kind reserved for men who have been too close to something final. She adjusted the Roman IV drip, her bracelet jingling softly. "You were lucky," she said. "Firefighters said you were still inside when the roof went, pulled you out just in time." He nodded slightly. Even that small motion made his throat ache. His voice came rough like gravel. "The others, everyone's out, no fatalities." She smiled, kind and tired. "You saved a lot of them, you know." He exhaled slowly. The breath felt deeper than any he'd taken in years. He turned his head toward the window. Morning had broken in pale stripes through the blinds. The world outside was washed in that post-storm light, soft, forgiving. In the distance, he could see the edge of the town, roofs glinting faintly, the faint blue haze of smoke still curling above where the school had been. The memory came in flashes, the flames, the noise, the boy's voice saying, "You came back." He wondered if they'd remember him now, not as the man who mopped floors, but as the one who refused to leave them behind. He drifted in and out of sleep. Time folded. The nurses came and went. Voices blurred into the steady hum of machines. He woke once to the sound of rain against the window, lighter now, almost cleansing. Then another sound. Laughter. Young, nervous laughter outside the door. A familiar voice followed, hesitant but clear. "Is he awake?" "You can go in, but just a few minutes," the nurse said. The door opened. 3 figures stepped in, awkward, silent at first. The same boys he dragged from the fire. Their clothes were clean now, hair combed, but the smoke still seemed to cling to their eyes. The boy with the varsity jacket, Ethan, he remembered his name now, held something in his hand. We wanted to say thank you," Ethan said quietly. "They said you're gonna be okay." Dale nodded, his throat too dry for words. The boy hesitated, then placed the object on the bedside table. It was the charred remains of a firefighter's badge, his old one, the one he'd kept in his locker. Someone must have found it in the debris. They said it was yours, Ethan added. We thought you should have it back. Dale stared at the badge. The metal was blackened, the edges warped, but his name still faintly visible under the soot. His chest tightened. He reached out slowly, brushing it with a trembling hand. Thank you, he whispered. The boys exchanged glances. None of them seemed to know what to do with their hands, their eyes, their guilt. Finally, Ethan spoke again. We were sorry about the video, about everything. Dale looked up at them, three faces caught between youth and consequence. You learned, he said softly. That's enough. The nurse appeared at the door again, signaling gently. The boys shuffled toward the hallway. Just before leaving, Ethan turned back. They're talking about rebuilding, he said. The school, they said they want to name the new library after you. Dale blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. After me. The boy nodded. You saved it. They said it's only right. When they were gone, the room felt quieter than before, but not empty. Something warm had settled in his chest, like the faint echo of a heartbeat he thought he'd lost. Later that morning, the doctor came in, a tall man with silver hair and a clipboard tucked under his arm. His tone was practical but kind. You've got second-degree burns, some smoke damage, a cracked rib, but you'll heal. You did a brave thing, Mr. Dale. Just did my job, Dale murmured. No, the doctor said, closing the chart. You did more than that. You reminded people what courage looks like when no one's watching. He left the room quietly. Dale turned back toward the window. The smoke had thinned now, replaced by the pale blue of a new day. He could see a few figures still moving near the ruins, fire investigators maybe. A part of him wanted to be there, walking the perimeter, checking every lock, every hinge, every door that had failed. Old habits died slow. He reached for the badge again. The metal felt cool now, the name faint under his thumb. Dale H. Turner, Fire and Rescue. He thought of the years between then and now, the nights spent unseen, the laughter, the quiet smallness of a life no one bothered to look at. And yet here he was, seen. He smiled faintly, though it hurt to do so. Outside, the day brightened further. Light pooled through the blinds, striping his face with warmth. The nurse came in again, setting a small vase of flowers by the window. Lilies. The smell was clean, almost sweet. These are from your daughter, she said. She's flying in tonight. His breath caught. Emma, that's right. He closed his eyes. Relief, gratitude, disbelief, all of it moved through him in one soft wave. He imagined her walking through the door, the same eyes as her mother, the same steadiness in her voice. She'd tell him she was proud. She'd hug him too tight. He'd probably cry. He didn't mind. Outside, the sun climbed higher, pushing back what was left of the storm. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Dale let himself rest, not as the man the world forgot, not as the ghost who haunted hallways, but as a father, a fireman, and, finally, a man redeemed by the flames that tried to take him. A week after the fire, the town gathered in what was left of the high school's gymnasium. The smell of smoke still lingered faintly, hidden under the scent of disinfectant and fresh paint. Half the bleachers had been replaced, the roof patched in places where rain had once slipped through. Banners hung from the rafters, bright, defiant colors against the ghost of what the building had endured. Outside, the morning was sharp and clear, sunlight catching on puddles from a light rain that had fallen at dawn. Inside, the air buzzed with something quieter than celebration, gratitude threaded with the kind of awe that only tragedy can create. The students filled the seats first, whispering in clusters. Parents followed, their voices low. Teachers stood near the back, their faces softer, humbled. A banner stretched across the wall above the stage, its words hand-painted and slightly uneven. To the man who stood when the world burned. Good morning, everyone, he began, voice steady but careful. We are here today not just to acknowledge loss, but to honor courage. To remember that heroes don't always wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they wear keys on a belt and carry a flashlight through the dark. The crowd stilled. A few students lowered their heads. A week ago, this school faced a fire that could have taken everything. But because of one man's actions, his bravery, his instincts, and his refusal to give up, not a single life was lost. He gestured toward an empty chair near the stage. A single folded jacket rested on it, Dale's uniform, washed but still marked faintly by smoke. Next to it sat a small frame with a photo of him, taken years earlier by a teacher who'd thought to capture the night guard who never smiled for the camera. The applause started slow, polite at first, then gathered force. hands clapping in waves, echoing through the rafters. Ethan sat near the front, his varsity jacket folded on his lap. His hands fidgeted, eyes fixed on that empty chair. The guilt had stayed with him all week, the memory of laughter in the halls, of the video that now made his stomach turn. He had deleted every copy, but that didn't erase what had happened. Nothing ever really erased what you once made fun of. When the principal finished, he nodded toward the microphone stand at the edge of the stage. "One of our students has asked to speak today, Ethan Miller." A rustle went through the room as the boy stood. He looked too young and too old all at once. The crowd waited. He stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat. His voice cracked on the first word. I don't really know how to do this," he began. "A week ago, if someone had told me I'd be standing here talking about Mr. Dale, I probably would have laughed. That's what I used to do, laugh." A murmur moved through the students. He glanced down, then continued. "I was one of the kids who filmed him. We thought it was funny. We thought he was just some old guy pushing a mop. But that night—" He paused. His eyes glistened, and when he spoke again, his voice was steadier. "That night when I saw him come through the smoke for us, I realized something. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a man who showed up every single night to keep us safe. And when everything went wrong, he was the only one who didn't run away." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the lights. "I saw him go back into the fire when everyone else was out. He didn't even think twice. I don't think I'll ever forget that." He swallowed hard, then took a small folded note from his pocket. "We wanted to say thank you, Mr. Dale. You showed us what real courage looks like, and we're sorry for every time we didn't see you." He set the paper on the chair beside Dale's jacket, then stepped back. The principal returned to the mic. "Thank you, Ethan. Those words matter more than you know." He turned toward the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to announce that the new library wing, rebuilt from the ashes of the old one, will be dedicated in his name. The Dale H. Turner Library." Applause erupted again, but this time it was different, no longer polite, no longer hesitant. It filled the gym like light, unrestrained and whole. At the back of the room, a quiet commotion began. The doors opened. The crowd shifted, and through the aisle, supported by a cane and a nurse on one side, Mr. Dale appeared. He moved slowly, each step deliberate, his face pale but alive. The bandages on his hands peeked from beneath the sleeves of a clean jacket. The applause grew louder, rising like a wave. He smiled, small at first, then wider, breaking the lines of weariness around his eyes. For the first time, he didn't seem embarrassed to be seen. He reached the stage, nodded to Harris, and gently took the microphone. "I wasn't supposed to be here today," he said, voice low but steady. "The doctors told me to rest, but I figured I've had enough quiet for one lifetime." Laughter rippled softly through the room. He looked out at the faces, students, teachers, parents, firefighters, and somewhere near the front, Ethan, eyes wet. "I don't have a speech. I don't have fancy words, but I do have gratitude for every one of you, for the people who ran toward danger, not from it." He paused, looking down at his hands. That night wasn't about heroism. It was about duty, about remembering that we're all responsible for each other, even when no one's watching. His voice grew quiet, almost a whisper. "Sometimes the world forgets you. Sometimes it laughs, but that doesn't change who you are. What matters is what you do when no one's looking." He looked up again, eyes glinting in the light. "And if this old school taught me anything, it's that respect is earned not by what's on your name tag, but by how you stand when things fall apart." For a long moment no one moved. Then applause filled the gym again, thunderous, rolling, alive. Some stood, others wiped their eyes. Dale stepped back, his hand trembling slightly on the cane. The principal leaned in. "You did more than save a school," he said quietly. "You reminded us what it means to care." Dale smiled faintly. "Then I guess it was worth the fire." 2 days after the assembly, the hospital room felt different, warmer somehow, as if the applause from that gym had followed Mr. Dale all the way here. The flowers on the bedside table were fresh. Someone had replaced the lilies with daisies and wildflowers from the field behind the school. The scent was faint and honest, the kind of smell that doesn't ask to be noticed. He sat propped up in bed, bandages still wrapping his forearms, a cup of lukewarm coffee within reach. Outside, the sky was a pale, forgiving blue. A soft breeze moved the curtain just enough to let in the hum of the city, a truck downshifting, a dog barking somewhere far below. On the tray in front of him sat a sealed envelope. No hospital logo, no return address. just his name written in neat, careful handwriting, to Mr. Dale. He turned it over once, twice. The paper was thick, slightly creased at the corners. Whoever wrote it had folded it carefully like something that mattered. He opened it slowly, sliding a finger under the flap. Inside, the first line was written in blue ink, a little uneven, as if the writer's hand had trembled. Dear Mr. Dale, I'm not sure how to start this, so I'll just say it. I owe you my life. He frowned, then smiled faintly. The handwriting was familiar, Ethan's. When we laughed at you, I thought we were being funny. We told ourselves it was harmless, just kids joking. I didn't know what real harm looked like until I saw that hallway filled with fire and you walking into it, not away. You didn't hesitate, not once. I don't know how a person learns to do that. Dale let out a slow breath. The letter trembled slightly in his hands. That night I thought the door was the end. When it wouldn't open, I remember thinking, this is what happens when you're stupid and cruel, you get what you deserve. But then you came through the smoke. You looked nothing like I remembered, not the quiet janitor, not the man we mocked. You looked like someone who belonged in that fire, like it knew you. He felt his throat tighten. He set the letter down for a moment, rubbing his temples. The hum of the heart monitor filled the silence. After the assembly, I found out you used to be a firefighter. I think everyone knows now. I guess that's the kind of thing people forget when they stop looking at someone. When we look at you, we only saw the mop, the uniform, the late shifts. We never saw what those hands had done before. You said something during your speech about being responsible for each other, even when no one's watching. I've been thinking about that ever since. I'm not sure I've ever been that kind of person, but I want to be. He swallowed hard. The boy's words weren't polished, they were raw, clumsy, real. Every line carried weight, like someone learning how to mean what they say for the first time. My mom said you'll probably go back to work once you heal, but I hope you don't have to. Not because you shouldn't, but because you deserve more than that building ever gave you. You deserve rest, respect, peace. He paused again, his eyes glistening under the hospital light. He remembered all those nights, empty corridors, the echo of laughter from behind closed doors, the cold hum of fluorescent bulbs. He remembered how invisible he'd felt, like a ghost hired to keep the living safe. Now, for the first time, the world seemed to see him in color again. I want to study fire science. Maybe one day I'll do what you did. Not the cleaning part, though I'd do that too, but the saving part. The kind that leaves people breathing when they shouldn't be. My mom thinks it's because of the fire. She's right, but not in the way she thinks. It's because of you. Dale smiled softly, shaking his head. The boy had no idea what that meant to him. I know you said we learned our lesson, and maybe we did, but I needed you to know this part too. We're not laughing anymore. We're watching, and we see you. The last line was underlined once, the ink slightly smudged. Thank you for showing us what kind of man it's still possible to be. He folded the letter carefully, smoothing the crease. For a long time he just sat there, watching the light move across the paper. Outside, a bird landed on the windowsill, small, restless, tapping once against the glass before flying off again. The nurse entered quietly, setting down a tray of breakfast. Mail from your fan club again. She teased gently. He smiled. Something like that. Well, I hope they keep writing. You've been good for morale around here. He nodded, sliding the letter back into its envelope. He placed it inside the drawer beside the charred firefighter's badge. 2 stories, side by side, the life he'd lost and the one he'd somehow earned back. The nurse left. The room fell into its soft rhythm again, the beep, the hum, the quiet. He leaned back against the pillow, eyes half closed. His body still ached, but the pain had changed. It was no longer punishment. It was proof. Proof that something had been saved, not just a school, not just the kids, but something in himself. He reached for his notepad on the bedside table and began to write, his hand unsteady but sure. Dear Ethan, thank you for your letter. I read it twice, then once more for good measure. You said you don't know how a person learns to walk into fire. The truth is, it's not something you learn, it's something you carry. Sometimes it's guilt, sometimes love, sometimes both. He paused, glancing toward the window. The light had grown stronger now, warm against his face. If you really want to do what I did, promise me something. Don't just learn how to fight fires. Learn how to notice people before they burn. That's the part that matters most. He signed it simply Dale. Then he folded the page and smiled, setting it aside. The letter from Ethan lay beside it, edges curled slightly from his fingers. 2 stories meeting in the quiet morning light, one ending, one beginning. 2 months had passed since the fire. The scars had begun to fade, some on the skin, some deep beneath it. Mr. Dale still woke up before dawn out of habit more than need. The world outside his window looked calm again. A morning haze stretched over the rooftops, and the air smelled faintly of rain and coffee from the shop across the street. He sat at his kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug, the steam curling toward the light. The hospital wristband was gone now, replaced by a thin silver watch Emma had brought him as a welcome-home gift. It ticked softly, a gentle reminder that time, despite everything, kept going. On the counter nearby lay two objects, a mop leaning against the wall and a small velvet box, unopened. The mop, old and worn, still carried faint streaks of cleaner along its handle. The box bore the seal of the city. He stared at it for a long while, unsure which of the two felt heavier. He had received the medal 3 days ago, presented by the mayor at a small ceremony in the council building. The room had smelled of polished wood and perfume, applause echoing against marble floors. Someone had read a citation about bravery, service, sacrifice. He had stood there, still uncomfortable in the borrowed suit, shaking hands, nodding politely. Cameras had flashed. His name had trended briefly on local news. And then, like all noise, it faded. Back home, the medal didn't quite fit anywhere. He placed it on a shelf beside his books, but it looked out of place, too bright, too proud. It wasn't that he didn't value it. It was just the mop had been with him longer. It had seen more of him. He reached for the velvet box now, flipping it open. The medal glinted in the morning light, gold with a red and blue ribbon, City of Fairview Medal of Valor. His name was engraved beneath it in careful script. He ran a thumb along the edge, feeling the cold metal. It was strange how something so small could hold so many contradictions, honor and humility, pride and discomfort, the weight of things unsaid. He looked up. The sound was light, uncertain. When he opened it, Ethan stood there, awkward in a pressed shirt, hair combed too carefully. He held something behind his back. "Hey, Mr. Dale," he said, voice low. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by." Dale smiled. "You found me?" "Yeah, the school secretary gave me your address. She said you'd probably pretend you didn't want visitors. She knows me too well." Ethan stepped inside, glancing around the small apartment. The walls were lined with framed photos, Emma at different ages, his late wife, a younger Dale in his fire department uniform. The boy's eyes lingered on that one for a moment. "You used to be a firefighter," Ethan said softly. "Once," Dale replied, "before I was a man with a mop." Ethan smiled nervously, then pulled out what he'd been holding, a small plaque, handcrafted, uneven at the edges. "The student council made this," he said. "It's for you. They wanted you to have it before the new library opens." Dale took it gently. It was simple, wood varnished by hand, engraved with clumsy but heartfelt letters. "To Mr. Dale Turner, the man who saw us when we didn't see him." For a moment neither spoke. The words seemed to hum in the quiet. "You kids did this yourselves?" Dale asked. "Yeah. No budget, so it's not perfect." "It's perfect enough." He set it beside the medal, both side by side on the table. Gold and wood, ceremony and sincerity. He noticed how the sunlight caught them differently, the medal gleaming cold, the plaque glowing warm. Ethan sat down across from him, his voice softened. "You know, the video's gone, everywhere. We reported every copy. The district even started some program about digital respect because of what happened." "That's good," Dale said. "Maybe something useful came from it." "It did. Ethan hesitated, his voice catching. "I applied to the fire cadet program last week." Dale's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You did?" "Yeah. I figured if someone like you could find purpose again after losing it, maybe I could learn to have some too." For a moment the room was silent except for the steady hum of the refrigerator. Dale nodded slowly, eyes soft. "That's a good start. But let me tell you something, firefighting's not about being fearless. It's about walking toward what scares you and doing the right thing anyway." Ethan smiled faintly. "Sounds like life." Dale chuckled. "It is life." They sat together for a while, not saying much. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full, shared. Somewhere outside, the school bell rang faintly in the distance, a sound that had once filled Dale's nights. Ethan rose to leave. At the door he hesitated. "One last thing," he said. "They're holding another ceremony next week. The superintendent wants you to speak at the library's reopening. You'll come, right?" Dale smiled, shaking his head lightly. "I'll think about it." Ethan grinned. "That means yes." When he left, the apartment fell back into its quiet rhythm. The sunlight shifted across the table, landing once more on the medal and the plaque. Dale looked between them, then reached for the mop leaning against the wall. He turned it over in his hands, the handle smooth from years of use. It felt lighter than the metal, but no less important. He placed it gently beside the two honors, a trinity of who he'd been: the rescuer, the janitor, the man who refused to disappear. He took a slow sip of coffee, breathing in the quiet, the smell of soap faintly clinging to his palms. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to separate the pieces of his life. The mop and the metal belonged together, proof that dignity could live in both glory and labor, in what was seen and what was unseen. Outside, the morning brightened fully, washing the room in gold. And somewhere, faintly, he thought he heard the echo of laughter again, not mocking this time, but light, human, alive. The first thing that returned to Mr. Dale's life wasn't his strength. It was the sound of ordinary mornings, the kettle whistling, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet, the neighborhood waking in gentle rhythm. He had always loved quiet beginnings, but now they carried a different kind of peace, the kind that comes after fire, after fear, after being seen. It had been 6 months since the blaze. The town had rebuilt. The high school stood taller now, clean brick, new glass, new life. And yet every time Dale passed it, his chest still tightened, not from pain but from memory. The laughter that once haunted those halls had been replaced by something softer: respect. Sometimes, as he walked by in the early evening, he'd see students holding the doors open for one another, teachers pausing to greet the janitors by name, and a small bronze plaque beside the entrance that read, "The Dale H. Turner Library, in honor of those who protect quietly." He never asked for that inscription, but he was grateful for it all the same. On this particular morning, the school was hosting its annual reopening ceremony, the first one since the rebuild. The library's ribbon cutting had happened months earlier. This was the school's first full opening ceremony since Reconstruction. They'd asked him to come again, and this time he didn't say no. He dressed simply: pressed shirt, the same worn watch, and that old jacket that had somehow survived the fire, patched and faded but his favorite still. As he stood before the mirror, he caught sight of his reflection, older now, yes, but calm. He ran a hand through his gray hair and smiled faintly. "You've come a long way, old man," he murmured. Outside, the air carried the crisp scent of autumn leaves. The sky stretched wide and clean, blue as forgiveness. When he arrived, the courtyard was full: students, teachers, families. A light breeze fluttered through the flags. The laughter he heard now was different. It didn't sting anymore. It was young, genuine, alive. Ethan spotted him first, waving from near the stage. He was taller now, his shoulders squared, his cadet uniform freshly pressed. Dale felt a quiet swell of pride seeing him. The boy had followed through. He was training with the county fire department now, part-time, while finishing school. "Mr. Dale," Ethan called, jogging over. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it," Dale said. They shook hands, the kind of handshake that says thank you without words. The principal took the stage, his voice amplified but softer than it used to be. He spoke about rebuilding, about second chances, about the way tragedy reshapes a community. Then he turned toward Dale, standing at the edge of the crowd. "We rebuild structures with brick and steel," he said, "but we rebuild people with gratitude. Today, we honor a man who reminded us that quiet work, honest work, is the foundation beneath it all." Applause rose again, gentle and unforced, and this time Dale didn't look away. He stepped forward when they called his name. The sound of clapping swelled and echoed, not in pity or shock, but in recognition. For once, he let himself stand in it. He let the sound wrap around him like light. When the principal handed him the microphone, Dale hesitated. The crowd waited, quiet. He looked out over the sea of faces, some familiar, some new, and for the first time he didn't feel small beneath their gaze. "I don't have a speech written," he began. "Never was good at speeches anyway. I used to think words didn't matter much, just the work, but lately I've learned they both do." He paused, taking in the sunlight spilling across the courtyard. "For years I walked these halls at night. Most of you didn't see me. That's all right, I didn't need to be seen. But I heard you, every voice, every laugh, every echo in those walls. You don't realize it, but the people who clean up after you, they carry pieces of your days home with them. Every mess, every note left behind, every laugh." The crowd was silent, hanging on his words. There was a time when that laughter hurt. Not because it was cruel, though sometimes it was, but because it reminded me how easy it is to forget that everyone has a story. You never know who someone was before you met them, or what they've carried to get here. He shifted the microphone slightly, his voice rough but steady. "That night when the fire came, I didn't think. I just did what I'd always done, my job. I checked the doors. I went back. That's not heroism. That's habit built from years of doing the small things right over and over, even when nobody's looking." He smiled faintly. "People think courage happens in big moments, but it starts long before that. It's in every choice you make when nobody claps for you." He looked toward the students, rows of young faces, some tearful, some smiling. "So if you remember anything from all this, remember this: be kind before you're proud. See people before you judge them. And don't laugh at the ones who sweep the floors. They might be the ones who one day carry you through the smoke." He lowered the microphone. The applause came again, strong and honest, like rain breaking through silence. He didn't cry, but something in his chest loosened, the way a knot finally unties itself after years of holding. Ethan stepped up beside him, eyes shining. "You did great," he said. Dale chuckled softly. "Didn't faint this time, that's something." "You didn't just survive the fire," Ethan said. "You put it out in all of us too." Dale looked at him, realizing what he meant. The shame, the cruelty, the careless laughter, it had burned away, replaced by something better. That night he walked past the school once more. The building stood calm under the stars. The library's new windows glowed softly from inside. Through the glass he could see a mural the students had painted, his silhouette holding a flashlight surrounded by color. Above it, in careful brushstrokes, the words, "The man who stayed when everyone else ran." He smiled quietly, tracing the air with his gaze. Then, turning to leave, he caught his reflection in the window, faint, silvered by moonlight. Not a ghost anymore, not invisible, just a man at peace with who he'd been and who he still was. As he walked home, the night wind carried faint laughter from a nearby park. It was light, unburdened, free. And for the first time he didn't flinch. He listened, he smiled. Because the laughter that once wounded him no longer had power. It had become what it was always meant to be, proof of life, proof that the world still moved forward. At home, he placed his mop against the corner by the door. On the table, the metal glimmered faintly in the lamplight. And beside it he placed the plaque the students had made, its words catching the glow just right. He turned off the light, stood for a moment in the quiet, and whispered to himself, "Good night, everyone. Keep the lights burning." Sometimes we forget the people who stand quietly in the corners of our lives, the ones who sweep our mistakes, who lock up after our noise, who keep the world turning while the rest of us sleep. We measure worth by titles, salaries, and spotlight, but true dignity lies in effort, in consistency, in doing the right thing when no one's filming. Mr. Dale's story isn't just about fire, it's about seeing others, seeing yourself, understanding that every person you meet is fighting a battle you can't see, carrying memories that shape their silence. So maybe the lesson is simple: be slower to mock, quicker to thank, kinder to those you overlook. Because sometimes the person holding the mop might just be the one who saves the world when it burns. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you once overlooked or someone you still miss, take a moment today to reach out, to say thank you, to forgive, or simply to notice. That's how we keep the light alive. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for staying with this story until the end. If you'd like more stories about family, courage, and redemption, please subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to remember their worth. Until next time, may your home be warm, your laughter be kind, and your family safe and together.